Hi, I'm Dr. Nancy Crupi. I'm a biologist with 15 years of academic research experience internationally, and I've been working on a lot of different things, and ultimately I have also had to overcome a lot of personal challenges. I'm here to guide you towards awakening and ego death. Ego death and trauma healing are the most important tasks we need to accomplish today for humanity. The second season of the New Earth podcast is going to be specifically focused on giving you stories so that you see the trails and what kind of breadcrumbs you need to follow for you to reach your own ego death, for you to reach your own trauma healing, and for you to embody your highest self finally. Let's start. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to a new episode of the New Earth podcast. Today we have Rachel Frey with us. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Nancy. How are
How are
you?
you doing?
Good.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm happy to have you here. So Rachel, he's a body and energy worker, and she's specifically trained in myofascial release, which is an incredible way of using somatic release to release energy and trauma in ways that don't necessarily require our consciousness for us to be conscious, which is incredible because today a lot of people really need to overcome their trauma and to reach healing in ways that don't necessarily require for them to be aware of their trauma, because a lot of people have very deep unresolved trauma that they can't release otherwise. So thank you, Rachel, for doing what you're doing. And so can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here today. So I specialize in myofascial release therapy, craniosacral therapy, as well as a modality called spinal energetics. And essentially, what we're doing is developing your own body's interoception, the ability and awareness to feel inside of our bodies.
Interoception, that's an important word. So interoception comes from Latin and means really uh, to feel our bodies from within, which is an incredible way of being present.
Yeah, and once we're able to attune to that within ourselves, during sessions, a lot of really beautiful things come up where people will go into a spontaneous somatic unwinding, which is my understanding is that it's the body trying to find these past shapes where something emotional happened, something traumatic potentially happened. And it's the way that our body is able to transmute and release energy that perhaps was, I don't like to use the word stuck, but was stored in that shape. And it's the way for the body to help process that energy, move it through. And then once that energy is unlocked, it becomes liberated, that then we can use it for creativity. The life force moves more freely. And yeah, it's really about unwinding our body's nervous system to liberate that energy and really come back to becoming our most authentic selves.
Wow, that's a great explanation. I really like it. Thank you for providing that to us. And this is really true because I feel like we don't consider the body as a form of storage, of memory, but instead it is like muscle fascia, like the myofascia, which is the. So can you just tell people what the myofascia is?
Yeah, absolutely. So fascia is the connective tissue that surrounds every muscle, every bundle of muscles, all of the organs. And it's really this three-dimensional web that's interwoven throughout our entire body. And it was really scientifically discarded, wasn't really paid attention to for so long until the microscope was developed that allowed us to see into living tissue. And now there's even a lot of research being done on fascia being sort of like a fiber optic network that's transmitting light and energy. And so, in the same way that nerves transmit electricity, fascia is also transmitting immense amount of information. Some also talk about how it's in our tissues that memories and emotions are stored in our bodies. So the way also that our body is taking in so much information that the body or that the brain can only process a certain amount of and has to basically put the rest of that information into storage banks in our body. It seems to be that fascia is really how a lot of those memories and emotions are stored, and how a lot of our body is taking in information and processing our environment through that tissue.
Absolutely. I think I have definitely experience of that on my own, like through body work. I have really released a lot of my memories. Like it's incredible how certain parts of our body are really connected to memories. Like, you know, like the past, I was being told that the past is in the left leg and the future, the present is in the right leg, and then the masculine side is on the right leg and the feminine side is on the left leg, or like left and right sides of the body. And it is so true. Like through body work, I have released a lot of memories, like touching certain points. I have revived memories for me that were from my childhood that I didn't even know I had, you know, like things that I had completely forgotten. And I think there are certain body types that specifically, like me, for example, or people who have a higher amount of fat in their body have a higher capability of using their body to store things in ways that can become even toxic, in the sense that I think ultimately like some people tend to acquire a lot of adipose tissue when they have a lot of traumatic energy to disperse, and they don't know how to get it out. And so because of that, their body's like, I need more things to act as a cushion to all this energy and this trauma and this suffering, this pain that you're giving me. So definitely, I think you're right. And we've been talking about the muscle fascia also in another episode with Emily Rooks that I suggest you guys to check out in the first season. And it's really basically the muscle fascia. I'm actually a muscle biologist, so I have a PhD in muscle biology. And so the muscle fascia is really, imagine all these muscles like bundles of muscles. And the muscles are, even if we don't realize it, the muscle is the biggest organ in our body because it surrounds everything. It's everywhere. We have muscles that literally wrap up our body everywhere, completely, like, you know, gift wrap, you know, like we're really completely wrapped like a taco in this tortilla that is basically our muscles and our muscle fascia, or myofascia. Myo means muscle in Latin, so it's the same thing. And so it's really everywhere. This is like a real web, because imagine each muscle is made of bundles, and each bundle is surrounded by connective tissue. And then this connective tissue also surrounds the groups of muscles, and then it surrounds the whole muscle, like your calf or your diaphragm or your, you know, each muscle in its entirety is also wrapped into an additional layer of connective tissue. And what is connective tissue? Connective tissue, and I think it's been overlooked for a long time, because connective tissue is supposedly not an active tissue. You know, like in our body, we have cells which have a function and are active and alive, and we have components such as collagen and fibers and things like that. They don't contain cells but only molecules, and because of that we don't consider those things as things that can in some way. We did not. Now it's different, but like in the past we did not consider those parts of our tissues of our body as an active part in some way. They were just, you know, there to act as a cushion or to keep things together, to help us maintain the structure. But instead, everything is a function, and everything is capable of storing energy and of being also a vessel for energy. And so it's all about becoming aware of that, and becoming aware that once you know that, you know, instead of being unaware that your fascia, your body can store energy, you become aware of it, then what you do is you let it go as well, and you let it flow, and you reopen that outlet that you had closed unconsciously, because simply people don't know that they can store energy. And so they keep, you know, storing, and that turns out into, you know, obesity, or like things that ultimately is your body placing a cushion to all the stress that you go through. And instead, when you have an outlet, and that outlet can be through body work, which is a way of doing that without having to necessarily become conscious of it, or through other methods, right? You know, like purging, or even just doing some other kinds of works that can have to do with therapy or physical exercise or different kinds of outlets, or even just writing down or talking about your stress with people. It's a way of having an outlet. A lot of people use art as an outlet for their thoughts, for their energy, for their things, and they can transmute that energy, as you're saying, to make it become something different than trauma. But if we are not aware of the trauma that we're storing or the energy that we're storing, then our body simply is like, well, if you don't understand that you're giving me all this stress, I have to store it somewhere to neutralize it. And so ultimately, our body neutralizes all the stress that we give it through muscle contraction and through all of these components that ultimately every molecule can store energy. Every molecule can store, a crystal is a memory, right? A crystal has a certain specific structure that ultimately it's there and, has its own memory. And if the structure changes, the kind of memory that it stores, the kind of energy that it stores, it changes as well. So in the same way, our muscle fascia can really change structure molecularly speaking, like can change structure and can change the kind of electric charge it has. And based on that, it stores a different kind of frequency, a different kind of energy. And so it's so important to release it through body work and through what you do. So I saw a lot of your videos. I love.
Sorry, it's interesting too that you mentioned the crystalline structure, because fascia, the connective tissue, is structurally a liquid. I studied material science in my undergrad, but it's fascia is a liquid crystalline structure, and so it has these really amazing electrical properties. It's piezoelectric, which just means that applying sustained pressure over an amount of time, it starts to have electrical properties that release as well. So a lot of times the sensations can feel very electric, and you can feel the energy moving during that change of crystalline structure with the body work.
Thank you. Yeah, because most people don't know what electricity really is. Ultimately, electricity is energy that moves. Energy that moves, and usually this energy is carried out by electrons, and so if you have a material that where electrons, because it's fluid, can move freely, that's already a conductor to electricity, and so obviously we need to become aware of these things, because ultimately our body is designed like a sack. It's designed in ways that, we have this empty space inside and these two layers of tissue that wrap it around. And so that means that energy can get in and then flow out, as much as our blood flows through our body first to give oxygen and then flows out to get out carbon dioxide. And so the same thing can happen in every other, like in all the other tissues, in all the other types of energy that we store, that is not necessarily in the form of oxygen and carbon dioxide, right? So we do that all the time. We do that by eating and drinking, and then we pee and, we urinate, and we eliminate all the waste that goes through our body. So our body has to be a vessel that transmute things, not that stores things. This is the most important lesson, I think, that I had to learn as well, that we need to be vessels and to transmute whatever we consume, whatever we ingest, which can be stress that comes from a lot of different sources, and we can transmute it into a plant, into blooming, into sprouting, or we can suppress it and just store it and make it become something that ultimately makes us become ill. So it's important to find ways to release it and to neutralize it and to cleanse it, and so to reset yourself and start over. So please go check her out and see what she's doing, because that's incredible. And I also like to, so I was saying, I don't know if you're comfortable with that, but I was seeing all of your videos and your reels on your Instagram that then we're going to put the link to, that she has all of these beautiful videos in which she shows how she uses this way of releasing energy through her body, which is just really so natural and beautiful. Do you feel like, would you like to give an example or just a link to one of your videos?
Yeah, link would be great. So I think the videos that you're referring to, there's a couple different ones, but one is just my own spontaneous somatic unwinding process. And it continues to blow my mind, and it is just a really amazing practice for allowing our body to, it's when somebody says like, oh, I love your videos online, it's like of you dancing, I feel this need to be like, to me it's a very different experience than dance. What's happening during a somatic unwinding is my conscious mind is taking a back seat, and it's really my body is guiding the movement. um, and my understanding is that the body is trying to find these shapes of moments in the past where trauma is stored, or something emotional happens, so that it can kind of like, I think of it like watching a movie on a projector, and the body's trying to find this like missing frame so that it can complete the loop and then resolve the energy that was stored in that shape. And so for me, I didn't even know that this was a thing that our bodies do. But I think it was my third or fourth session of receiving a craniosacral treatment. And all of a sudden, my visual field went really dark. I could feel my conscious mind really take a back seat. And then my head just started rolling side to side and into these figure eights. And what's really important that I want to stress is that you're still very present as to what your body is doing, and so you're very much still in control of, it's not a scary process where I'm still in control and I can stop it at any time. um, but when we are able to really trust the body and trust that we're in a safe space to find this trauma resolution, then the body leads with its own intelligence to heal whatever it's asking to be healed. And so my body just started moving, and through that movement, so we might have all heard this before, but emotion is energy in motion. And so it's basically just using movement to release energy that had been stored in that shape. And sometimes memories will come up, and I'll be able to know exactly what that was. Um, One of my favorite somatic unwindings, I was having a beautiful, great day, but I just turned on music, did my somatic unwinding process. And about 10 minutes in, my body was really able to find this expression of anger and rage that I hadn't had access to for a very long time. And so um, our body is just so intelligent in finding the ways that it wants to release when we're given the time and space to do so. And so, yeah, the videos online are my somatic unwinding practice. And we all have access to the ability to somatically unwind, but it's just developing this attunement, this quality of presence where we can allow the body's movements to take over and then show us the way towards healing. So, yeah, that's
Yeah. Like, I agree with you. And I love that you described this is the first time that someone else describes the same experience that I have. I love that you used your hand to go backward to explain that your consciousness is taking over and your mind is stepping back, which is so at the beginning of like a couple of years ago, I started having experiences in which I also had the experience that you're saying. So I basically I developed a way. I realized once I reopened my third eye, I realized that if I imagined all my thoughts like a cascade that would flow down behind my head, and I will intentionally allow them to flow, I will get to a point where they will just stop. And my consciousness was able to pop out, because consciousness is usually always trying to activate, but our stress takes it down and it prevents our conscious part of the brain from working. And so what I was doing basically was I was allowing all the energy of those thoughts to release. And after all of it was gone, finally my consciousness could activate, because I was basically turning off my fight or flight mode in that way. And I really felt I really would actively do the movement that you're doing. Imagine these thoughts that will flow down through like my forehead and my cranium and like towards the back of my head. And then I will really feel these different consciousness awaken. And I realized, and then I started having the same experience that you're having, like of like my body. I will use musica medicina, for example, and my body would tune into the notes and start moving on its own. And it was incredible. Like my body will just, it was as if my body was possessed in a sense by the music. But I was there. I wasn't under any medicine. I was just like, I was just there, and my body would just dance. But it wasn't a real dance. It was, as you're saying, a form of somatic release. I had a lot of things to release. And so the music will just help me, because music is waves, right? And waves give you energy. And so if you have something stuck, and I use it through my rapé practice as well, like I use rattles to move the energy out of the body, which is very useful, because ultimately if something is stuck, is because, it's like it has reached a point of like a point of low potential that needs something to push it out again. And so music can be extremely, extremely useful for that, because music is ultimately energy in the form of waves that tune specifically into the frequency that you need, so that those things are moved out, even if they have reached this like hole in which they're stuck, right? And so you're basically pushing them out. And this is a beautiful way of explaining it, like as you said. And it's really your mind turning off, and your consciousness. And the consciousness is a different way of existing, a different way of being present. And it's very much of a stepping back and watching. You're just basically activating the witness modality that I always talk about also, and I explained it a lot of times in the previous season, which is a way of watching ourselves. And so once you start seeing these things, and you start seeing all of your thoughts popping out as you release these things, and be like, oh, wow, this pose reminds me of this specific time in which I was angry, or I was sad, or like I've been hurt. And then I allowed it to suck in. I allowed myself to suck in this thing, because I was missing this piece of information, which is that it's not my fault, that is nothing personal, or that this is just ego, or it's that this is just lack of confidence, or that I feel guilty, or that I'm in fear, that I feel ashamed, So all these things ultimately kind of like catalyze this action, this reaction, in which these energies, these thoughts, these emotions get stuck, because they're helped by these carriers, which are our thoughts, such as shame, guilt. And so instead of allowing yourself to push out and to let this energy flow, they kind of convince us that we need to suck it in. We need to keep it in, and to allow it to store into our body, into our fascia, into our muscles, into our brain. Like there are so many different places, into our adipose tissue that are fat. So I had exactly the same experience.
Yeah, and I think it's our body, it's our body having this really beautiful intelligence for self-protection. So, in that moment of trauma, our resources went to fight or flight in that moment, and then we weren't resourced enough in that moment um, to resolve
Yeah.
what was happening. You think of like um, the body keeps the score. It's or the body holds the story. In a moment of a car accident, our body has this really beautiful intelligence of, let's put all of our resources to survival, and then the processing of that emotion can happen later. And so I think that's just also really important to highlight, is that the storage of trauma is a really intelligent system designed to keep us alive and safe in that moment, and that it's just a beautifully intelligent way that we are able to protect ourselves by not needing to be in that rational mind in that moment until we are resourced enough to handle it later. So, animals have this, if you've heard of the neurogenic tremor, so there are practices where we can allow our bodies the therapeutic shake. And I
Like
do.
flapping our wings, like a lot of animals flap their wings after a fight, or after something very scary that happens to them. It's a way of releasing that energy.
Exactly.
But we
Yeah.
had this, like the thing is that we had these sort of rituals for the entire prehistory and history, like humans had these rituals in which we will dance and we will shake and we will fight against one another, also in ways that were ultimately meant to release, even like fighting against each other in places where there is conflict, but if you fight against your enemies, like, okay, then you can resolve whatever issue you two had before it becomes a war, before it becomes a much bigger conflict. And so, like, there are a lot of things. For example, Native Americans have a lot of ways of releasing energy through also, coming together around the fire and talking over things and, opening their hearts through cacao and through the coca leaf. And like, there's so many different ways through tobacco, that so many different plant medicine that are used for the same purpose. And we need to definitely shake it off. And I think in our society in general, really the problem is that we have, as you're saying, our body is very intelligent, our mind is very intelligent, and so our body has all of these mechanisms that are supposed to be of service in specific moments of our life, like during a trauma, during an accident, during in times in which you need to survive and you need to put all of your resources to survival. But those are considered temporary, like we're supposed to do these things temporary. And then, as you're saying, then we have time as soon as you feel safe and you get back home and you're not running away from predators anymore, you can get back home and release stress and process that trauma and process. So the problem is that really our society is disconnecting us from that, and it's making us believe that a lot of stressful things and abuse that we go through every day, it's normal, it's acceptable. And so that thought is what is making people store all of this energy instead of releasing it, because they believe it's normal. And instead of releasing it, they worsen the situation by drinking alcohol or by drinking things or by using painkillers, by doing things that ultimately turn off that pain and make them forget, because they never have time to do the next phase. So the first phase is fight or flight mode. We fight, we try to survive, and then we get back to safety, and we finally release that emotional trauma. And instead, in society, we're constantly in our fight or flight mode. We're constantly receiving abuse. We're constantly not allowed. People have 3 jobs. Like, really, there is a real attack to our sacred space, which is that space that you're talking about, the space in which you finally feel safe and you are allowed to release. And instead, that sacred space has been under attack for a long time, because if you develop illnesses, big pharma makes a lot of money out of you. Like, that's exactly how it works. And so that's why it's important today instead to give people different means to understand that they need to take that time off, that they need to take that time, that sacred space every day, to release that trauma, to process their emotions, and if we do that, there will be no conflict, there will be no wars, everything will become a lot more, nice and peaceful, because we will have the time to release, to flap our wings and release our trauma and our emotions, and to reset and go back to normal, so that next time when things happen again, then we can respond appropriately. Because what happens is that if we don't respond, if we keep storing these things, what happens is that either we become hypo-reactive, in the sense that we react less, and so we start getting used to a certain level of abuse, a certain level of stress, and we keep allowing ourselves to absorb more and more of that until our body screams to us and is like, I'm sorry, I'm in burnout. Or we simply become hyperactive, and that's when people develop PTSD and things that ultimately make them become very easily triggerable, because then their nerves are already in a very high threshold of activation, and that's when your body starts screaming and tell you, that's it, I had enough. So you have to take this sacred space for yourselves. So I would love to know how you got into this. Like, I feel like it's a very specific type of body work. There are a lot of people that work that are body work. There's energy workers and somatic healers. I feel like your type of work is very, very special and specific. And so where were you born? How did you start? What's your story?
Yeah, I grew up outside of Chicago in Illinois, as well as spent a few years of my childhood in Indonesia, in Jakarta and Lombok. My mother is from the beautiful island of Java, Indonesia. And so we got to spend some time there when I was younger. And yeah, I was just really fortunate to be guided along this life path. I was living in Colorado where, um, I feel like Vinyasa yoga is kind of this gateway into spirituality for a lot of people, where, the first class I went to, it was because I wanted to get that good workout in. And then, but just through my yoga practice, other doors and information started to come into my awareness around meditation, and just really got a lot more curious. And it was just one of those lucky things where a friend of mine recommended a craniosacral therapist when I was living in San Francisco. And then so I became curious about that modality for body work. I've always loved receiving massage, but I knew that this was going to be a very different experience. It's extremely, extremely gentle, where it just basically consists of the practitioner holding in different areas of the body and listening to the rhythm of the cerebral spinal fluid as it pumps between the skull cavity and down the dural tube. And what we can do is induce a still point in that flow, and it feels like this like whoosh through the body, and it's a really beautiful moment of stillness that feels like a nervous system reset in that moment. And so it all of these modalities are ones that sort of found me through friends' recommendations, and they just really resonated. After my craniosacral therapist practitioner moved along with her journey, I started receiving myofascial release work. And my practitioner studied with John Barnes in Sedona. And again, I would just have these really wild experiences on the table of somatic releases, where she would just be holding my ankle, connecting with the fascial tissue, and I would experience a huge release in the opposite shoulder, because we have these fascial chains that run in different directions along the body, and it's also interconnected. But yeah, emotional experiences, big physical releases, accessing memories that I hadn't thought about in 20 years would come into my field. And so at the time I was working in fashion, and it was just a constant chase of emails and production deadlines.
What were
And
you doing?
I used to do apparel technical design. So I was working with the designers and with the factories to bring garments to life. And then I also, for a few years, had my own line of yoga pants that I developed the fit for and brought them to life. And it, yeah, I think so many of us experience this moment of burnout, of, then coming into questioning, is this what I want to be doing with my life and my time?
But
And
why? Was it stressful?
yeah, it's stressful. It's just, our bodies think we're being chased by predators, by lions, but it's our body is being chased by an email. It's ridiculous when you like think
Oh
about
my gosh.
it. It's
What
like
you just did is unbelievable. Like, you're right. It's like today,
it's the same
predators have just taken a different shape. Like, the way in which we are chased has taken a different shape. Like, if before we were chased by predators, now it's our bosses' emails that are becoming very abusive and very, like, pushing your triggers and pushing your capability of, again, I think what our body does, our body, mind, and consciousness do is, feel like we have this space in which we're centered and safe and neutral. We are at peace. Okay. And so anything that makes us drift from that or push us out of it, whether it is a predator or whether it is an email, everything that ultimately makes you drift from this center and makes you start vibrating in fear tells your body, hey, you're not safe because you're not in that center where you're supposed to be. You're not feeling safe. And so you need to get back to that. And so I feel like we perceive as predators or like threats to our survival, because I feel like for a long time, I feel like there is this huge misconception created by the word survival, because it's like, it's not, it's not that you're gonna die through an email, right? But survival, so that's why I think we need to reevaluate what survival means in today's world. Like, we're not chased by lions anymore. But what is survival? Survival ultimately has to do with the survival of our inner light, of our innocence, of our capability of being centered, of our capability of being truthful. Because if an email tells you all the time, like, you need to work, 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 and then you're gonna have to start lying, for example, or you're gonna have to start saying no, or you're gonna have to cave in, or you're gonna have to find ways to cope with the fact that there is this constant attack to your peace, to your center, to your innocence, to your truth, that is the truth of, I need time, I need space, I feel like we have a vital space that is not necessarily physical and is not necessarily made of actual survival. It's made of safety, like, this is the space that we have that is made of safety, and it's a space where we are allowed to be ourselves and to be innocent and to be free and to be, without having to feel that we are under threat, we need to lie, we need to change ourselves, we need to manipulate or to be strategic, or to, we can just be ourselves, and we are allowed to. And I feel like our society today, through capitalism and through all these corporations that really become very abusive for the sake of profit, because capitalism in itself is a scam, because there's no way you can take care of human beings if your goal is profit. These two things don't go together. In fact, what is happening today is that basically people are being replaced by robots and AI, because after a while, these corporations are like, oh, we have chewed enough people. Like, they don't last enough. They go into burnout after a while. And so it's really like not a good way of protecting our safe space. And so protecting that space is the most important part of it. But for us too, I feel like we drift so much through, these sort of things that you've experienced as well at work. It's like we drift so much that it is our body, that has to tell us, I have reached limit, like, I can't stand more of this. And I feel like our body composition really makes a big difference in that, in the sense that people like you, like, you're like skinny in a sense, like, you don't have a lot of fat in your body, you're very slim, in a sense. And so I feel like that changes the threshold of how much people can go through. There are certain people that really can store a lot more, or people who have the tendency to acquire habits that allow them to anesthetize that pain are people who last longer in these sort of situations in ways that ultimately they're poisoning their body, right? And instead, when people don't have the kind of outlet and they're healthy and they're like, I want to be in my space, I want to be safe, I want to feel good, I want to feel peaceful, especially when you know what that means through yoga or through different practices and meditation that allow you to feel that feeling and to be like, this is the feeling I want. I don't want to try and suppress the need for safety. I don't want to try and suppress the need for space to relax and to feel good, to feel safe, to feel good about myself, and to feel like I can express myself without being under threat. So I feel like we need to really revisit this idea. What is survival in the modern world? Like, today's survival is not anymore. It's not anymore, and it's never been. It's just that the level of the threshold of threats changed. In our society, survival is the survival of your light. And so if your light is constantly quenched by all of these abuses that we receive constantly, all the stress, and we are constantly drifted from our truth, and we are constantly forced to strategize. What is strategizing? Strategizing is you not being truthful to yourself in order to survive, because if you had to be truthful, you didn't need to strategize. You had to just be yourself. And so anything that makes us drift from our inner truth is ultimately a threat to our survival. That's what survival means today. It's not anymore our body survival, it's our soul survival. is a different kind of concept. In a world where that is more safe, we don't have predators that, roam around in the savannah anymore. We are safe physically speaking, but safety has become more related to our soul safety, our inner feeling of safety that has to do with our capability of expressing ourselves and of being ourselves and of feeling happy and joyful. And joy I think is the is the main word here, really, that we need to be able to feel joyful, and we all get to a point where we don't feel joyful anymore. So you got to this point, so this breaking point, by understanding I don't feel joyful anymore, basically.
Yeah, I think I think it's just become so, like what you said, it's redefining that word survival, and um it's just become so normalized. I mean, over the years, and with technology too, that um because of the constant barrage of notifications and emails, and our work, um you know work demands, but we can feel it in our body. We can feel the tension that we hold. We can feel our tight, everyone has back pain, hip pain, neck pain, because the body is creates these tension patterns. It's our body's trying to work with us to support these shapes and structures that our body takes, as far, bending over a computer, looking over our phone. The shapes that we occupy start to become the shapes of our body. And I celebrate all shapes and sizes that our bodies come in, and do honor our body's intelligence for holding tissue that we need to in that moment for survival. It's But yeah, I think ultimately we all hear that little voice. We do. It's just like, and I think what it can come down to is, am I ready to follow that voice and really listen? And sometimes that requires a little bit more time and resourcing, to find that safety again. Like, I the importance of divine timing. I didn't leave my job until I felt like I had the capacity to leave my job. There's a reason why I wasn't ready to until I was. And with these stored tension patterns in our body, it's bound up energy. And so once we're able to recognize, oh my gosh, I'm storing so much tension in my body from this stress, the body is requiring a tremendous amount of energy to hold ourselves together through that stress. And once we give ourselves the slowness, I think slowness and presence is one of those things that sounds so boring, but is truly deeply profound and so necessary for us to come out of it. But once we can liberate that energy that was then fueling the holding of the tension patterns, it becomes so much easier to then move through the world intuitively. That voice gets louder, and we really start to move that direction. And a huge part of my journey was also receiving network spinal care. I saw it was like a Goop episode with Dr. John Amaral, and when I saw that episode, it was a soul recognition of how I was like, what is he doing? I have to learn that. What is going on? It's just such a compelling thing, and what he's doing, and what my teacher, Dr. Sarah, with spinal energetics, what we're doing is we're basically connecting with the energy field of the body that is, it can be measured 4 to 6 feet off the body. It's scientifically been measured by instruments that are sensitive enough to do so. Our heart has an electromagnetic field that radiates from our body, and we can feel this from each other when we're in proximity, or even through Zoom, we could feel each other's energy. And so basically, by going into somebody's energetic field, we can help them move this energy that it has been kind of blocked in a certain area, and find areas where it is flowing, and move it to areas where it's less resourced. And it's ultimately about self-connection and connection to the greater world around us. And how do we reconnect with the disconnected parts of ourselves and become, come back to wholeness?
Yes, yes, this is so true. And there's so many beautiful ways of doing that. But like, I feel like really I like what you're doing and the way in which you're doing it through the body, because really a lot of people have, and I talked about deep unresolved trauma in my previous episodes. And it's really like a lot of people have deep unresolved trauma that they don't know how to process. Or maybe sometimes I feel like it's a lot of, there is a lot about definitions that really shape our capability of understanding things. Because survival is like, hey, survival, what do you mean? I'm not under I'm not being actually threatened, so I'm surviving. So people don't understand what survival, that they are under threat, because they tend to associate the idea of survival to being chased by a predator. And in the same way, I feel like the definition of trauma tends to be very much associated with like an incident, or like very traumatic experiences that have to do with, shocking things that happen to us. And so a lot of people don't understand that that's not trauma. Like, that's not necessarily trauma. That's a big trauma. But trauma is a lot of different things. And ultimately, I explain trauma in a very different novel way in one of my past episodes, in which I explain to people how trauma ultimately is, which is perfect what you're doing, what you're saying. Trauma is basically like, imagine we have a normal like setting of our body and of our mind, which is this: when we are truthful, when we're safe, when we are centered on our inner truth, inner light, and we're joyful. And then something happens to us, which can be someone tells us something, someone, gives us ideas and seeds ideas in our mind that ultimately make us believe that that setting that we have for some reason is not good enough, or is not appropriate, or is not supposed to be like that. And so we start changing our setting. And start changing our setting means that we change our epigenetics as much as we change our thoughts and how our brain is wired. And because these changes are not natural to us, then we need to put a lot of cushions. And so we start developing these contracting patterns in our body and this energy storage in our body that ultimately become our new setting. But this new setting is not anymore our truthful, joyful self. Is a setting that prevents us from being connected to our truth. And the reason why we do that is because we have seeded a belief or a thought of any kind that makes us believe that we need to change that setting for whatever reason, because the setting we had before was wrong. And so we do that. And so that is trauma, right? That is trauma. And that kind of trauma can happen in a lot of different ways. It can happen through your family, your surroundings make you believe that you're not good enough, or that your empathy is wrong, or that your generosity is too much, or that your joy is not supposed to be, or that the fact that you want space for yourself, how dare you, all of these things, these ideas that we are seeded constantly, even unconsciously, from people, not necessarily intentionally. A lot of people just simply have their own setting that they believe at this point it's the norm, and it's supposed to be the norm. And they, as much as molecules, they touch each other, and by vibrating, they induce other molecules to vibrate in the same way. This is what happens in society. And so people vibrating in frequencies that are the frequency of misalignment ultimately force others around them to vibrate in the same frequency. And until you do that, they keep poking you because you're the only one that is still. And right. And so we keep doing that. And so going through this world of unconsciousness, of people vibrating in this very misaligned frequency, then forces people like us, because I feel like there are certain kinds of people in the world that I call the flowers of the earth, that are the generation that has genetically and epigenetically already cleansed from the trauma from the past, from the generational trauma, from the wars, from the trauma of the Big Bang. We're already cleansed. And so what happens is that we're born already aligned. And then by being surrounded by people who are not aligned, then we start being forced to kind of change our vibration, change our setting, and we're convinced that this is normal, like you did through your job. And then you're like, wait a minute, my body is not responding well to this. I think I was right at the beginning to think that the world is not supposed to be like this, not supposed to be like this. And so through time, people that have already cleansed genetically, what they do is they're kind of forced to go through this arc in which they first do acquire these maladaptive behaviors from others around them, and do try to homologate with the world and to adapt to the world and to change themselves. And they reach a point in which their body is like, no, we were right at the very beginning. Stop doing this. And then we stop doing that, and we realize that. But this is not something that everybody is capable of realizing. Like, not everybody goes through the same journey, because genetically speaking, we're different. And so we're really the genetic generation that has cleansed from that. This is my own theory, because, like, it's not, there are studies on this, but it's pretty visible that there are people right now that react to the world and are awakening from all of these kind of crazy world society in which we live, very egoic society and stressful society. And they're awakening because they have cleansed from all of the previous trauma, and their body is not willing to put up with the stress anymore. And it's like, no, I want something different. So that's when we have the breaking point, and we change. It's when our body, and that's why our body, listening to our body is so important, because our body is part of our ego in a sense, in a physical sense, but also it can be a beautiful mean to understand when we're truthful, when we're being aligned, and when we're not. Because when we are aligned, our body is really at peace and is really healthy. Just healthy, I think, is the best word. Like, it's just at peace and healthy. And I was talking to my mom earlier, and in Italy, unfortunately, we had a lot of spreading of big pharma. Like, big pharma has literally made Italy become their farm. And so people are under so many pills that ultimately just put patches and make them develop obesity. Like, Italy has one of the best diets in the world, and in the past 20 years, obesity, even in children, has increased so much, and it's due to all the pills that people take and all the stress that people undergo through. So all these things. So we really need to reset. And people like you and like me can really help society understand that, because we went through that and we're like, no, you guys are wrong. Now I know that you guys are wrong. You should just have an outlet for this instead of allowing it to make you become ill to the point that then you're like, you don't feel joyful anymore. You don't feel centered. You don't feel like you're doing what you're supposed to do, like you're misaligned, and it's like responding to emails all the time. And it becomes just a nonsensical thing that you do every day that doesn't really allow you to have a function in the bigger ecosystem of society or of the world. It's just about profit, and it's really not useful to the earth. And so I have a question for you. So do you feel like you had traumatic experiences of any kind, like this sort that I'm saying, to cleanse from, like things that through your work or through these aha moments or like breaking points, do you feel like you realized of having some these sort of like very seemingly small trauma that are in fact ultimately very deep forms of trauma that we tend to swallow in, and don't realize that they're really changing, making us misalign so much? You feel like you had anything like that?
Mm, um, let's see. Yeah, I feel so tremendously lucky and grateful that my life path hasn't, exposed me to experiences of what we call the big T trauma, um, big physical injury or big emotional injury. And I think what we spoke about briefly at one point was how, these small traumas actually can also be very impactful in our lives in the way that we move through. I think for me, the the energetic like imprint that has carried through until I've been able to really look at it has just been um, emotional attunement. The way that we're raised by parents, my parents are very loving, supportive people in my world. And through them working when I was growing up, I just don't know that I had that level of like emotional attunement as a young child. And so when I think back to my childhood, I think about these moments that just felt very um, disconnected. I think I spent a lot of my childhood in a very shut down, freeze response, just hours and hours and hours zoned out in front of the TV while my parents worked. And, I'm so grateful for them and how they were able to support my sister and I growing up and have a safe home for us. But there's something so powerful about a parent being with a child and saying, your emotions and what you're going through is real, versus a child who doesn't quite have that experience of being able to talk through life experiences and have that attunement to feel emotionally really seen. um, what's this is such a and I think when you speak about trauma too, I think it's also important to name that what one person finds traumatic, another person it's just another day. And so what it's not necessarily the incident that is traumatic, but it's whether or not our body in that moment has the capacity to deal with it, of whether or not our body registers that as trauma. And you mentioned briefly like epigenetics. My mom has told me stories about her childhood of, being in years where there was abundance and years where, because of, the political situation in Indonesia, there were um, food rations and, threats of being recolonized and, a lot of unrest and turmoil and, these moments of very extreme danger. And so, the genetics that carry this information of famine and not being resourced, and just knowing that that energetic imprint is then passed down through generations. And so, um, my relationship to scarcity very well could be an energetic imprint of trauma that my mother experienced or grandparents. And
What kind
so
of relationship do you have with scarcity?
for me, one of my like financial patterns is this desire to like save and hoard. And like I was that fifth grader when I would take my like $5 a week allowance to the bank at every single week. And so it was just like this little squirrel that had to put it away, and I would just get so much joy from saving. But what that did is it really restricted the energetic flow of financial abundance. And so, it was always just so fascinating to me to meet people who, you know, just really move through ebbs and flows where, they'll get a big paycheck and then like spend it all. I just like that to me is just like so unrelatable. But now I'm starting to really realize how money is energy, and it wants to be, it wants to flow through us and become creative, be in service to creativity. And so a lot of my personal patterning has been unwinding this grip and fear of scarcity, because it's such a foundational survival is.
Absolutely. I love what you just said about generational trauma and how that imprints us, and from a but evolutionary biology kind of standpoint, when this happens, what happens is that the following generations develop like a sort of spore kind of mindset, like, and so you have a spore-like mindset. What is a spore? A spore is something that kind of decreases the flow towards the outward flow and tries to really maintain things as they are to make sure that he has enough resources to bloom when it's needed. And so this is really like a pattern that it can be found anywhere in nature. Like we do repeat the same exact patterns all the time. And this happens a lot when as you're saying, in certain countries, they went through famine, or they went through a lot of very like circumstances. They were not steady, they were like up and down and very unpredictable. So when things are very unpredictable, then epigenetically speaking, to survive, our body has to develop germ cells that then are used to make children, that then tend to be more spore-like, to be more like, okay, because my environment, because your mom didn't know that you were gonna fly away from where she was, right? But that's also one of the reasons why you're here and not there, right? Like, because there is a whole imprinting then whenever there are situations in the world in which there are a lot of wars, there are a lot of very unpredictable circumstances, then the following generation of children tend to be more like spores or pollen, like people that try to find a better place to live in, or people that try to make sure that they have enough resources and that they accumulate as much as they can so that they can cope with that kind of situation. So this is a fear that is ingrained in us in a way that goes beyond our mind, because it's not something that we realize. It's just how we are. It's just our inner engine, to the point that it becomes how we are built. As you were saying, is like, I just have this engine in which I feel joyful if I save, and I feel not joyful if I spend. And so it's just how you are. And like, it's not that you're doing that because you're greedy. It's just your epigenetics, that imprinting that has made you be in this state because there was a reason. Your mom used to live in a very unpredictable environment, and in such an environment, until you find your own spot where you can actually feel safe, and for a while, for a long time, you can perceive that your environment is steady and it doesn't change much, then you can sprout. Then the spore that you are can sprout, and probably that's what is happening to you today. And this is oftentimes used, like, we live in, I feel like most of us don't know how much these mechanisms are actually used by governments. So governments constantly use this mechanism to create flows of migration to different places. So what happens all over the world, like, the NATO or like all the colonizers do that all the time. They create war in a certain country and they create a very unpredictable environment. So, and they prevent people from having good opportunities there, so that then the next generation feels the need of emigrating. And then once they have this need of migrating, then channels are built for them to end up in a specific point where it's a corporation, where you end up becoming an employee. But it was all meant to be. It was all designed to be like this. So governments use this all the time, and they've used wars as ways to create flows of people through corporations, because otherwise nobody will work for a toxic corporation. So you had to create people who are escaping from something so much worse than working for a corporation, that they will perceive working for a corporation as something good, right? And so that's the only way in which it can work. And so that's why today we really need to become aware of these patterns, so that we become aware that this is just a trick. It's just a trick that is being used. And that even if we are like, who will do something like that, creating a war on purpose to, well, I feel like most people don't know that corporations and fraternities and Masonic organizations and governments are institutions that are much, much more long lasting than us. And so even if we live 100, 70, 80, 100 years, there are entities on our planet that have been surviving for thousands of years. And so that means that they can plan and they can pass down knowledge and make strategies that don't necessarily need to last one generation or with one person, with one lifetime. They can replace, the person in command can be replaced with someone else, but the ultimate plan of the organization can stay the same. And so there are a lot of things that have been happening for hundreds of years in the world that we don't realize, that are really planned, have been planned. And so these constant attacking, so why are we attacking so much? Like, what's the point today of causing all this much war? And there's always a reason, like, religion, and it's just BS, right? So all of these reasons that we are really caused intentionally, like these wars are done intentionally just to create, because wars cause exactly what you're saying, causes the environment to be so hostile that then people have to leave. And once people feel the need of leaving, then you can attract them wherever you need for them to be and give them conditions like, it's been slavery in the 150 years ago. You can't have slaves anymore. And so today it's more like they have to use these strategies in which people move intentionally. And once they move, then you're not doing anything wrong in attracting them to a job. Like, so it's just a more covert way of ultimately having tools for corporations. And unfortunately, this is happening all over the world, and it will keep happening until humanity will awaken from that. And until people like you will find the truth, will find ways of understanding that this is not, this state of fight or flight mode or even spore mode, it's not what you're supposed to do. As you're saying, it's like money is like water. Money needs to flow. You have the right, and it's all about your belief system. You have to tell yourself that you have the right to be abundant. You have the right to feel safe. You have the right. And once you understand these things, then everything becomes more, it goes in a flow in a different way, because then you're going to expect to be treated in a different way. You're going to expect to have your sacred space. You're going to expect to be able to have the time to process our emotions, and you're going to find ways to do that, and you're going to prioritize that, and you're not going to save all the time, because if you save all the time, you can't possibly flourish. And so to flourish, you need to water your plant, right? And so it's all a mechanism, because it all goes together in the sense that, as you did, like the fact that you saved so much then allowed you to have the resources to flourish whenever you were ready. So it was all part of, like, as you're saying, the body's perfect. We're perfect. We're already designed to be like this. And so it's important to just follow our intuition and follow the breadcrumbs that we find. I love that you were saying that you're like, these things just came to me. Like, I just started vinyasa yoga, and then from there, a lot of doors open. It's not just random, it's just because you were finally allowing your flower to sprout in the right direction, because we don't know these things. We don't know our epigenetic imprinting. We don't know the generational trauma. We don't know why we behave in certain ways, because as much as a plant doesn't know why it behaves in a certain way, as much as an animal doesn't know, they just follow who they are, And so by being yourself, you're going to be doing exactly what the animal and the plant that you are is supposed to do, and use your survival strategies in the way in which you're supposed to do, which initially go through the ego and then ultimately become a flower once you finally realize, oh, okay, this ego was just the seed that allowed me to go through the world and to survive. And now that I finally realize that I can have the ego death, I can break this shell that the ego had created and finally bloom. Right. So I think it's really how it feels like. What do you think?
Yeah, it's I think it just the most important piece of it is learning to listen to that inner voice. And it just, that sounds so simple, but of course not easy to do. But I think even if you're not ready to take the step that voice is telling you need to do, just acknowledge, like the first step is just acknowledging, okay, I heard that voice. I have access to it. I have access to guidance from within. And then, the layers can start peeling back really slowly, slowly or quickly as they need to. Yeah, it's really, really such a beautiful journey and process.
Do you have a special ritual that you do to like get in tune with your inner voice?
Um, I It starts with like a seated meditation practice. And I like this idea of using a question, of just asking, asking for, like, thank you for showing me my energy. Um, one of my prayers is like, dear God, show me where to stand. And so it's really just trusting that the information will be given to me when I need it. I can go out and look for answers, but I think it's really just the ritual of stillness and presence is so, so, so powerful. Um, and yeah, and just the understanding that when we're in this sympathetic, stuck in like a fight flight mode, there's nothing wrong with that because it's our body's intelligence that is keeping us safe, but really understanding the mechanisms and that physiology of I'm not going to get these intuitive hits when I'm stuck in fight flight mode. And so it's really pursuing um, the self-care to find practitioners who can help us along this journey of and co-regulate with us and help us find our resources, our safety in our body. And an important one or a really helpful one too is just feeling feet on the ground, feeling my back against the seat, feeling my pelvis like on the seat beneath me, my relationship to gravity. These are all really powerful ways that we can resource the body's sense of safety that then allows this snowball to happen of sensing safety and security, and then that intuition really starts to awaken. I think of it as our bodies are these antennas that are both receiving signals and transmitting signals, the same way that a radio works, the same way that Wi-Fi works. And so as we go through life and take on these experiences through life, oftentimes with societal expectations, um, other people's outer voices being louder than our inner voice, our radio tuner of our truth gets shifted to another channel or to static. And so as we can unwind our body back to, releasing these stored tension patterns, we dial that radio antenna back to our own channel. And then everything just snowball. Everything, I can't stress that enough. Like all we need to do is start taking these really small actions, and then the rest of it, so we start to magnetize, things just come into alignment. And so we can let go of this idea of like figuring things out. I've
Absolutely.
noticed that with this practice and with this work, the more treatments that I go get, the more aligned the things that show up in my life. It continues to astound me, and the beauty of how that works is really awe-inspiring to me. Um, but yeah, once we are able to be tuned into our own channel, the magnetism really starts, and synchronicities happen more frequently, and that voice of intuition just gets louder and louder.
Yeah, I agree with you. I totally agree with you. I think there is a whole higher intelligence, that ultimately guides us through the world, and that everything has to go in a certain direction, in a sense, in the universe. And so it's not that we're really, I feel like we believe we have this free will. We do, but like it's really limited in the sense that there is a higher divine order that is just unfolding, and we're just part of it. And so once you realign with your truth and with your function in this divine order, then you just simply become you, and you stop having this fear that comes from being misaligned and from not understanding what is going on. And I always give people this example of like the red blood cell in the blood, like that if you just don't understand that you're simply a red blood cell that is carrying oxygen and that is supposed to go through the whole thing, you're just gonna be pushed around by other cells and get stuck in vessels, and hit the vessel and feel like, oh my gosh, I feel stuck. And then if you finally realize, oh, I'm a red blood cell, I'm supposed to do this, then you allow the flow to go, and you allow yourself to just enjoy the journey and just do things, and things come to you naturally, and oxygen comes to you because you are a red blood cell. You're supposed to take it on, and then you let it go at the right time, and then you take it on again. So it's a flow. Well,
I
we
love
need to, yes. And what we need to understand that to really be more aware of the fact that we are being guided, that we are part of this divine order. And once you align with it, just things come to us based on the function that we have. And it's important to just really let go of the fear of death, to let go of the fear of not survival, to let go of the fear of, I'm not being taken care of, because your cells in your body don't need to strategize for your survival because they're taken care of. Like, who needs to strategize for survival is a cancer cell, because he's detached from the body and it doesn't have any more function for the body. And so it's important to really realize that as long as we have our function in the world of society and in the body of the world, and not the function that corporations, this capitalism want for us to have, because that's the cancer. We want to have a function that has to do with really what the earth needs from us. We are the earth. So our body is the earth. We are cells of the earth. And so when we realize that we are part of this divine being, of this holiness, that it's the dimension of love of the universe. When we realize that we're part of that and we realign with that, and we allow the flow to make its course and to take us where we need to be, and to bring people to us when they need to find us, as long as we're truthful to ourselves, people are going to be able to recognize our function. Their own higher self is going to be able to recognize our higher self, and together they're going to help each other in doing what they need to do for the divine order of things to just happen and to unfold. And we just need to be truthful, and once you're truthful, everything starts going in their own flow. And once we realign, everything starts going normal, as it should, like without fear, without having to fear about money, about resources. And there are times in life in which we have to let go of things, we have to lose things for us to make space for new things to come into our life. And so a lot of times people have ups and downs, financially speaking, but ultimately most of these financial downs are often a function of how the flow works, like, because you need to go through the downs for you to go through the ups. It's just once you surrender to whatever is happening to you, then you're like, okay, this is how it's supposed to go, and let's see what's next. And I love that you said that you're just not trying to strategize and not trying to find the next move, because that's exactly how I'm realizing more and more. Also, I need to be, in a sense that it's also just very important to be present, because oftentimes we are not present, and we tend to be very focused on the next move. Like, we talk to people and they project to us a future that we may really like, or money, or things that we want, and for the sake of that reward that we see, that is like the carrot on the back, for the sake of that reward, we we don't take decisions in a truthful way. We don't make choices based on what we actually observe. And so there are a lot of people who come to us and tell us things, like, I want to give you a job, and it's really not the job that you actually want. It's really misaligned from you. But then by seeing this next future, by being projected in this future instead of being present, instead of listening to your intuition and to your instinct, you're just projected in the future already. And so you skip the present. You're really just directly going there. And you don't realize it's just, most of the time, it's just a bait, because it's like advertisements, like they always, like, they can't sell you a perfume that costs $400 by showing you that you're going to be miserable if you buy it. They have to show you that you're going to be this incredible model on the beach, on the boat, rich, and all these things. But that's just a bait for us to do things that are ultimately very misaligned from ourselves. And so it's important to instead realign and understand that if you're present, you don't need to really know a lot of things, know a lot of information, to make choices. Whenever the choice, like, as long as you're truthful, if someone asks you to do something that is like really not in your best interest, or in the best interest of the people that you're like, I don't think I should do this, like, and so it's just a matter of being present. And once you're present, you can gather a lot more information than when you are in the future, because when you're present, you're going to see if the choice you're being, the reality, the truthfulness of the choice you have in front of you. Like, is this actually true that I'm gonna be this model on a boat if I buy this perfume, or they're just trying to sell me to sell me a product, right? And so if you understand that, instead of projecting yourself in the potential future, right? If you understand that, then you start making choices based on the truth, which is, maybe I want this perfume and I want to buy it, but at least I know, I'm not going to suffer when I realize that that I haven't become this model on the boat, right? Because a lot of people have these expectations that come from all these promises we're given all the time through advertisements and through jobs and through all of these corporations that really project possible futures in front of us, so that we channel ourselves and our energy and our work into their own pockets, basically. And instead of doing that, we just have to be present, like, and if you're present, I feel like everything is an experience. And so we have to go through this arc for us to come back. Like, everybody has to see, okay, I actually now realize that I was misaligned, because if you never misalign, it's difficult to understand that that you were misaligned in the first place. And I believe that in the next generations, the more people like us will be leading society, the more people are gonna have guidance to not having to do this arc, not having to make this arc. And so children are gonna be able to find themselves and stay aligned with themselves. And I feel like it's happening already. Like, kids today are very self-confident, are very self-secure. They don't believe in all the BS we have believed in as we were growing up. Like, I feel like there's a lot lesser bullying in a sense. I mean, but there is a lot more consciousness. Kids today are like 4, 5, 6 years of age. They're so intelligent already and so capable of discerning between something that is truthful or something that is aligned or not. They already know what they want to do as adults. It's like I didn't know until college almost. So it's like I feel like a lot of people today is really changing. Things are happening a lot faster, and the new generations are not going to need to make the same arc if we guide them through. If there is guidance to show them, look, I've done this already, like, I can teach you for now that you don't need this. And it's how things work, like, every time we learn something, that we project it to others, and we show them, look, this is how it goes. This is how the story goes. It's like movies and cartoons. Like, this is how the story goes. If you make this choice or if you make this other choice, it's up to you. And so it's a way of learning, teaching people how to make choices that are more aligned with themselves, so that the new generations won't have to make the same arc that we had to make. But ultimately, the arc has allowed us to learn a lot of things, like, and to become teachers about this. And that's what we're doing today. That's what you're here today, to like teach people your arc and how you got to understand, your own place in the world. What's your function in this puzzle? So what do you think is your function?
It's becoming more and more clear to me that in the same way that my craniosacral therapist unlocked the sensory ability within my body, my function is to help others awaken that same self-connection as well. The power is in connection. And so for me, it's really unlocking other people's sensory abilities, because then we can just really hear our body's communication so much more clearly when we have that capability. I think of it as like, in the same way that we have sight, smell, taste, we have this inner sensory ability. And, I can start off as somebody who can understand that I'm drinking red wine, and then I can go to sommelier school and I can develop this sensory palette to really distinguish so much more information from the climate, the year, etc., just from developing and refining that taste. And so through the modalities that I've studied, it's really awakening that sensory refinement in other people's bodies that then we can listen to our body's communication. And I'm curious too, Nancy, you had asked me a really beautiful question around ritual, and I'm curious if you also have a ritual and how you connect with your intuition and how you know it's intuition. I feel like that's a
That's
question.
amazing. Yeah, this is the very first time someone asked me a question in my own podcast. Yeah, so I have various ways. Like I use rapé as plant medicine to help me connect. I use plant medicine to help me cleanse, but I think everybody is a different journey because everybody's going through different things. Like I'm also a political activist, and so I'm doing a lot of things that have to do with litigation and like trying to bring the world to a different stage through the jurisdictional system as well. And so to do that, I'm going through a lot of stress. And so it's stress that affects my body and affects my physical body in ways that I need to release that have, can be released through somatic work, but needs also to be released also in terms of molecules of purging or like, being able to really have help from the consciousness of plants that can help us recenter, because it's something that sometimes like I need to do things like every day that are very stressful. And for me to stay centered in my holiness, I need to really make sure that I put cushions. And so I use a lot plant medicine to make sure that I that is functional to my journey. And then daily I meditate and I use transcendental meditation and this same method of like letting my consciousness reactivate by taking my thoughts back and to make my thoughts out. I use breath, helps me reactivate my consciousness and be present. And same thing, I surrender and I journal. Like I surrender to, I kind of like do kind of the same thing that you do in the sense of ask a question. And like when I'm put in front of a choice, I kind of write down in a flow of consciousness and I realize, things kind of flow through me and I'm told things like, just relax, don't worry, your body's just going through this, just relax and like things are gonna come, just do the right thing. So I feel like I have a lot of methods that have to do with really turning off my fight or flight mode and allowing my consciousness to emerge and to just silence my mind. It's just about that, silencing your mind. And I have this meditation that I do every day to reconnect with God, they reconnect with the earth, reconnect with the elements, and reconnect with my body and with the presence, and to really get back to being present instead of being projected towards the goal or towards what I have to do. Is just if you're present and you're truthful and you feel how your body feels or how your mind feels about a certain choice, then the choice is automatic. It's just you don't really have to think about it. It's just like, this choice is actually really good. This choice is pretty detrimental already, or it's painful and I can feel it doesn't give me joy. So even if it sounds crazy to choose the other path, my instinct tells me to choose that. And so that means that the seed that I am, that the engine that I have, which is the engine of the function that I have in the divine order of things, it's telling me to do this. So that means that that's my function in the world. And ultimately, if we don't have our function in the divine order of things, we're useless. Like it's like we become cancer cells. And so it's important to have that function. And it's instead of putting our life as beings, our physical life as a priority, we have to put our function as a priority, because we are ourselves only if we have our function. If we don't have our function, we are already poisoning the world. Like we are depriving the world of the function that we're supposed to have. And we are also becoming, due to our fight or flight modality, we are starting to, we take away resources from the body instead of having a function and giving back and actually receiving and being aligned. So it's important to prioritize our function. And so that's what I do. I feel like this is my ritual to like turn off my mind, and in various ways. And I also use yoga poses to help me reset or recenter what I need to do for the day. And then I set the goals, and it's all through consciousness, in the sense of I allow and to tell me what I need to do next. And ultimately, it all comes down to being present. Like everything really comes down to being present. But thank you for the question. That was beautiful.
Yeah, and when you say function, I feel like there's society puts so much pressure on us to like know our purpose, and that was something that I had struggled with for a really long time until I found that answer found me. Was like feeling like I'm feeling lost and purposeless until that came to me, and so um, when you were speaking about that, what was coming through for me was just hearing how um, we can if we don't feel like we have like oh, I know my purpose in this world, it's like, well, what brings me joy? And that can really start to be a beautiful question to prompt. It's like having a function in from day to day. Well, what is like one tiny thing that I can do today that feels really exciting and nourishing to me and brings me joy. One of the things that I like to do is like if I'm at the grocery store, I'll try and reconnect with like a younger part of myself, and it's like what snack would bring you joy today, and just giving ourselves these small gifts of joy and excitement. And yeah, what are these small ways that we can connect with creativity, because creative energy is, I think, is our function, is a big part.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah, we're creators. And I think really the joy is a key word here, because ultimately we are here to be joyful.
Yeah.
That's it. We're here to be joyful. Like we're not here to be slaves. And so whenever we feel like something is enslaving us, is oppressing us, is not allowing us to be joyful, that means that we have become part of a cancer. We're not part of the body. If you're part of the body, you're joyful. If you're part of a cancer, you feel bad. You're going burnout. So that's why corporations have become today something that we really need to cut out. Really need to. And I learned a few days ago that I have that my I had this feeling that started growing, talking about functions. Like a couple years ago, I realized that my function in the world is to cut out this society from the oppressors. I'm
Mhm.
really like the cell that is gonna cut out those things. And you see how my hands are like this. And so I discovered a couple of days ago that my Mayan energy is actually an energy in which the symbol is the double-edged obsidian knife, and that I am a healer. Like for the Maya, I was the the Mayan doctor. I was the main healer. And this is my personality based on my birthday.
Yeah.
And it is so true. And it says that basically the Mayan, the knife can be a scalpel, to perform a surgery. And it's funny because for my whole life, I remember my ex-boyfriend used to make fun of me because when I was in college, I used to use my hands like talk like this all the time. And so it was like, you would make fun of my way of gesturing. And it's really how my energy is. I tend to be very, to divide things in a very fine, like specific way that like I discern when people are light workers and when they're not. I discern where people are doing the good of society and when they're not. I'm very, very good at doing that. And so that's really my function in ways that people don't realize that. Most people see the world in a very confused and very kind of messy way, and instead I have a very clear view of people and of their heart, of their intentions, of like things that people don't even imagine. I have this sort of almost omniscience in a sense of how society works. It's crazy. It's like a form of clairvoyance and clairsentience that is very sharp now. And I feel like I have realized that I have this role of cutting things out from the world, in a sense of cutting out. And that's what I'm doing. I'm dividing the healers from the non-healers with this podcast and with like hosting people in a very specific way. I don't remember why I started saying this, because you were talking about feeding the joy in your inner child. And so I think something that I realized it's very important through my mission is that what gives me joy is really, really awakening people to be able to discern, to find their own joy, to find their own capability of recentering and discerning between what, basically what I'm trying to give them is my same capability of discernment so that they can discern, this is causing you pain, this is causing you joy. So you have to go through the joy. And so I'm basically the doctor that is using the scalpel to cut out the tumor from us,
Our societal surgeon.
I am a societal surgeon. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm a societal surgeon. Yes, exactly.
What it continues to keep coming back to, and there's, yeah, joy so much, but and also like not in a spiritual bypassy way at all, where we do have to be able to look directly at the shadow and the dark sides of our society and what things are, and the oppression, and also oh, I just lost my train of thought, but um, it continues to come back to connection, and I think that word function, and we're all here to connect, and so what I see you doing is being able to use your scalpel tools to cut away the parts of society and our worlds, our inner worlds that are not in service of connection, so that the parts, the light workers that are here to facilitate connection can continue to thrive without that resonance of that which needs to be cut away.
Yeah. And our function really changes also through life and every day. It's not that so ultimately our function is being joyful. That's it. Our function is being joyful. If at 10 years of age, 15 years of age, you feel joyful saving, that's your function. If you feel joyful running, that's your function. That's your function. Because even if that is just part of your journey. Like a lot of people in my interviews tell me, yes, I realized that I learned hypnotherapy and I learned all of these healing modalities. And at that time, I wasn't really thinking of becoming a healer. I just felt dragged towards these things. And I did learn. And now that I become this person that I am today, I realize that everything that I've done before was functional to the person that I am today, and it was actually necessary. And so we don't do things. It's like it's not that a lion goes and he's like, oh, I'm a lion, I have to do all of this and that. It's like I feel like we have this idea from cartoons in which animals already know what they are, what their purpose is, right? And instead, reality is that we simply are beings, and society has reached such an enormous level of diversification of roles, and we are completely cut out from the knowledge that we used to have in ancient times, that really we are completely cut out, and now we perceive society as a mass of people all kind of like having these functions that are made of job titles and functions in the corporate society. And instead the real function of us is completely different, has to do with our personality type, with our skill set, with our level of empathy, with what bring us joy and what doesn't bring us joy. Ultimately, that's exactly what it is about. And so if you follow that feeling daily of like what does bring you joy and what doesn't bring you joy, then you're going to find your path, because that's exactly your inner engine. Is like a lion doesn't know that he has to survive hunting gazelles, but he feels joyful and excited when he hunts gazelles. And so he does that. A gazelle doesn't know that she has to escape from lions and to eat grass, but she feels joyful when she can be free from lions, and she feels fearful when she has lions around. And so like we just have to, this fight or flight mode ultimately is functional to our function as well, because it tells us what we need to escape from and what we need to chase, because what we need to chase is what gives us excitement and joy, and what we need to escape from is what gives us fear and anxiety and whatever it is, and sometimes that is your family, sometimes that is your job, sometimes that is your circumstances, whatever it is. If you feel like you have to escape. If you feel like you feel joyful, do that more, and it's just, and things change because with age people have different needs and different purpose in society. You know, like we can't possibly have the same purpose in society when we're 15 or when we're 30 or when we're 70. Our purpose changes because we're part of a design in which as we age and as we change, as our body changes and as our brain acquires information, then our potential of being useful to the earth and to society changes. Like the way in which, you know, like you are useful today with the things you have learned. You didn't know those things when you were 10 years old, you know, like, and so our purpose changes, but everything is functional to the animal that we already are and we're supposed to become, and that we don't see because we have been disconnected from all of this. Like, for example, the Mayan energy that I discovered about. Like, if someone had told me from the very beginning that I was supposed to do that, you know, probably would have been, I would have had a totally different life in a different way, but it would have been much more useful than a society that tries to channel us. But ultimately, even if nobody told me that, um, I've been attracted to things and I've studied science and I became a healer anyways. You know, like, so I didn't know that I was supposed to become a healer and I didn't know that I was supposed to become a doctor, but I became. And so you see, like, what I mean is just like, because we ultimately do, because nobody can do for too long things that don't bring them joy. And so ultimately, even if we are detached from joy for a long time and we start taking pills and drinking alcohol and eating junk food and to forget that we're not feeling joyful, then we always get a breaking point in which we're like, that's it. I have 10 more years to live. I don't want to not feel joyful for 10 years. I'm going to just feel joyful. And so there's always a breaking point. But ultimately, our function is to feel joyful. Don't you agree? What do you think?
Yeah, I just that all resonates.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I really love for you to give some information about your services, where people can find you, and we're gonna put all your links in the description. But like, if you have any specific event that you do every week, or things that you do often, or where you have your studio or where you work, let us know. Tell us.
Yeah, so I do one-on-one in-person sessions in Echo Park in Los Angeles. I also do virtual sessions for spinal energetics. So my website is sensorybodywork.com, and you can go ahead and book a session with me there. And on Instagram, I am sensorybody, SENSORY_body. And that's where I have some of my somatic unwindings as well as little clips of um, what a spinal energetics session can look like and some insight into that.
I
Yeah.
love it. And check out her Instagram, guys, because I really love her videos. I feel like I heal just watching them. It's very beautiful. Yes, it's really like I can feel that you're just unwinding and you're just allowing yourself to destroy these patterns and to heal from them and to release that energy that was stuck, you know, that was just stuck there. And if you just move in a certain way, then that energy finally gets released and you're free. And that's beautiful. And I can see that from the videos. And I think everybody should start doing that because ultimately, you know, what you're doing is also something that people can do on their own. They don't necessarily need to have a practitioner. So this is something accessible to everybody. Yes. So check out our Instagram. We're gonna put our links to the description. And if you guys want to, you can find me at 360holisticcoach.com, or you can find my Instagram at 360holistic.coach. And I think I really loved this episode. I really loved what we just said and all the things we talked about. It was very interesting, and I hope that you enjoyed it as well. And please, guys, share it. What do you say?
I just said thank you so much for having me. And yeah, please share with
Yes, please share it with everybody so that people know about these different modalities of healing that are really accessible to everyone and they're so necessary and don't require for you to be conscious about your trauma, about the things that you need to release, but that is there stored in your body and that really needs to be let go of so that you can really be free and feel like you can be more creative and use your energy in a different way and really reestablish this flow of energy that your body is supposed to allow instead of hold. So thank you everybody for listening, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you.